Name is Alicia. I am the Educational Programs and Volunteer Coordinator at the Learning Disabilities Association of York Simcoe. And I'm here with my colleague Tori, who runs all our social skills programs. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about learning disabilities, ADHD, and advocacy. I will ask that if you have any questions, we will be addressing them at the end. But as Vicky said, Nina is also in the chat.
Okay, so just a little bit about who we are as an organization, just to give you guys kind of a brief idea. We do have chapters all over Ontario, but we are York Simcoe. So we are a non-for-profit organization. We were actually established in 1976 as the Learning Disabilities Association of York Region. So a little bit about what we provide and what we do. We provide leadership in learning disabilities. In advocacy, we do research, education services, and we strive to advance the full participation of children, youth, and adults within the community. So last year, we actually expanded our services into Simcoe, making us, of course, the Learning Disabilities Association of York Simcoe. After seeing a need in that area, we thought that would be a good idea to expand. And so just some brief examples. We will go more in detail about all of our programming and services later on, but just to kind of give you a brief idea of what we do service navigation, we have academic programs, we have social skills, as well as counseling. But like I said, we will go more in depth about more of our programs and kind of what we do later on.
Before we get started, we're just going to launch a little poll here that everyone can participate in. So that should pop up on your screen now. And we just want to kind of get a better understanding of who's watching tonight and what everyone's current understanding of learning disabilities is. Give everyone a second to answer that. Okay, it seems like everyone has a pretty good understanding or some experience with learning disabilities, so that's good to know. Thanks everyone for participating in that. So, what is a learning disability? Learning disabilities refer to a number of disorders that can affect the acquisition, organization, retention, or understanding of verbal or nonverbal information. Learning disabilities result from impairments in one or more processes related to perceiving, thinking, remembering, or learning. So this can look like oral language, written language, math, processing speed, organizational skills, and time management. And then we also work with people that have ADHD or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So this is marked by an ongoing pattern of inattention, hyperactivity, or a combination of both that can interfere with executive functioning skills or development. People with ADHD might have difficulty maintaining consistent levels of attention, staying still, staying on topic, or organizing tasks and materials. So both learning disabilities and ADHD have something in common in that they vary in their level of severity and they look different in different people. So no two people with a learning disability are going to learn the same way. No two people with ADHD are going to understand things the same way.
So to kind of help give an idea of how the brain works when it comes to learning disabilities and ADHD, A good example that we like to show or talk about is kind of thinking of your brain like a filing cabinet. So this illustration just kind of helps show the many different steps of comprehension when it comes to LDs and ADHD. So first, your brain processes, you receive the information, and then your brain takes it in. Once the brain has inputted the information, it goes through a process of how it organizes it. So then you have the information and now you need to store it. Now someone is talking to you and asking for something, or maybe a student is doing an exam and they now need to figure out, now you need to figure out where the brain, sorry guys, I'm blanking on my notes here for a sec. So someone is talking to you, I have an example for an exam question. Now you have to go into your brain and retrieve that information that you have stored. If the info was stored in a short-term area, it's probably gone. But if it was stored in a long-term area, then we may still have access to it. So then it goes into how is your brain then going to take that information, put it together, but then being able to actually get it out, whether it's through verbally or maybe you're writing an answer down on an exam. So learning and filing information takes a bunch of steps, like we just kind of went over. And if one of these areas is impaired or has difficulties, it can affect the process of how we learn, but also how we gather information and put it out there. So this is basically just a way to view learning disabilities and ADHD, and especially with the difficulties in different processes. And the different processes we will kind of discuss later on in the PowerPoint as well.
So, like we mentioned, there's lots of different types of learning disabilities. And I have quite a few here that I wanted to explain because there's often some misinformation around the different types. So, dyslexia is a language processing disorder that impacts reading, writing, and comprehension. Someone who has dyslexia might have difficulty decoding words or with phonemic awareness, which is identifying individual sounds within words. Dyscalculia encompasses learning disabilities related to math. This sometimes results in math anxiety. People with dyscalculia struggle with numbers, reasoning, and various math concepts. So maybe reading clocks, counting money, or identifying patterns. These can all be difficult for people with dyscalculia. Dysgraphia is when someone has trouble converting their thoughts into writing or drawing. So symptoms of this would include poor handwriting, difficulty with letter spacing, poor motor planning and spatial awareness, and trouble thinking and writing simultaneously. So I'm sure it happens to all of us every once in a while where we're thinking of a word and trying to write something different, and we end up writing something else. But that type of thing would be much more enhanced in someone who actually has dysgraphia. Auditory processing disorder is difficulty maintaining attention in noisy settings or following directions. This can affect the way someone speaks, their ability to read, write, and spell. They may drop the ends of words or mix up similar sounds. It can also be harder for them to talk with other people. They might not be able to process what others are saying and come up with a response quickly enough. Language processing disorder. These people might have trouble expressing their thoughts or understanding what others are saying. This is concerned with how the brain processes both spoken and written language rather than the physical ability to hear or speak. So people with LPD might struggle to comprehend the meaning of words, sentences, and narratives because they find this type of thing challenging. Nonverbal LDs is a difficulty understanding social cues or more abstract concepts. So children with this disorder are often well-spoken and can write well, but they might struggle to recognize certain social cues and comprehension of abstract concepts. This disability can share some symptoms with autism, but it's a completely different diagnosis. I'd also like to note here that autism does not fall under the umbrella of learning disabilities. It's a little bit different. Visual perceptual or visual motor deficit is when you have difficulty understanding the information that you are visually seeing, as implied in the name. It refers to the ability to organize information into patterns. Visual spatial processing deficits can show up as problems understanding and making sense of visual information. So, for example, perceiving the spatial relationship between two different objects.
So I want to just give everybody maybe a minute or so to try and read the page or the example that we have up here. And then I'm going to go through with you guys and then kind of explain what it is and what it says exactly on the page. So just to kind of, there's another example like this later on. So I'm going to actually read what the paper says, and I want to see if you guys can follow along and see if you can put the words together to see if you got it correct. So this paper actually read, it is difficult to learn to read when the words don't stand still. Can you imagine what it is like to read when words and letters move up and down on the page? Reading is not my favorite school activity. It helps to use my finder or my ruler to keep my place so I can read. So this is what reading may look like for a student that has a learning disability that affects reading specifically. But this is also actually an example of Erline syndrome, which is a visual and perceptual processing disorder, kind of like what Alicia just touched on the last slide. So when somebody is also stressed or anxious, it can make the symptoms, of course, a lot worse when they're trying to read. And something that I just thought I'd note is that there are actually specific orange and blue glasses that are helpful in reducing the symptoms of the moving letters. So some other accommodations for not just this specifically, but for children that just have a learning disability that affects their reading. So reducing the amount of reading required is an accommodation that can be used, as well as offering time extensions for the child to read what's on the paper, rephrasing the words into simpler terms, having them have a reading buddy or just a partner to read with them, kind of help them through the reading process, as well as highlighting specific text so they know what to focus on the page, giving them an audiobook or giving them it as an option, providing, of course, a quiet space for them to read as well, and just lots of positive reinforcement for the student that is reading.
Okay. Though this is not always the case, it's common for those diagnosed with a learning disability to also have a diagnosis of ADHD. And then, as I mentioned before, we also work with individuals who have a primary diagnosis of ADHD. One common misconception is that everyone who has ADHD is hyperactive. Lots of students and people do show hyperactivity, but others might just be inattentive and quiet. Contrary to the name of the disorder, the main traits of ADHD aren't even related to attention or activity. They're more so related to inhibition, impulsivity, and emotion. It's also important to understand the different types of ADHD. So here I've outlined the hyperactive impulsive type, the inattentive type, and then the combination type. So the impulsive type, these people might seem like they never slow down and they get bored super easily. And then inattentive, they might have problems staying on task, paying attention, being organized. And once again, another thing that's important to note here is that this isn't due to defiance or a lack of comprehension. It's Not that they don't understand, it's that there's some deficits in executive functioning there. Then there's the combined type, which is the most common type of ADHD, and it's a little bit of a mix of the two types that I just explained. So, what can you do if someone has ADHD? Strategies for improving executive functioning in people with ADHD can include giving visual timers, allowing people to fidget, giving extra time, breaking down large tasks into smaller ones, and acknowledging and reinforcing any positive behaviors. As people with ADHD get older, they may want to explore strategies such as cognitive behavioral therapy for boundary setting, building healthy habits, and emotional regulation.
So just some stats on learning disabilities. These numbers may have changed, but so 3.2% of Canadian children have a learning disability. So if you think about it, that is one child for every school bus of children. Usually to be diagnosed with an LD, in most cases, it is once the child starts school when it's really noticed. However, that's not to say that you may not notice symptoms in the child before they start school, but we will go more in depth about the diagnosis process later on. And then just some ADHD stats that we have. So 4 to 6% of adults are diagnosed with ADHD, 5 to 7% of children. So that's about roughly 1.8 million Canadians. And one of every 21 people in the country have ADHD. And there has been a 1.6% increase in Canadians with ADHD since 2017. So these numbers could be higher by now, since there is more knowledge and kind of more known about ADHD. And we also have seen an increase in adults actually being diagnosed with ADHD later on in life.
So, why do we tell you about these stats? Um, the reason why is it helps reduce stigma. So, stigma refers to a negative set or unfair beliefs about a certain topic. Both learning disabilities and ADHD are common, and they're never something that someone should be made to feel ashamed of in any way. Having positive conversations about learning disabilities and ADHD early on in life can help reduce stigma, which in turn helps people receive the support they deserve. Um, Given that we're here with CMHO, it's important to acknowledge that stigma is a huge barrier to support, not just for people that have learning disabilities and ADHD, but also for people who have mental health challenges. Many people don't get the help they need because they're afraid of being judged. However, since learning disabilities and ADHD are an invisible disability, you can't see that they have a learning disability. They're not going to get the support they need unless they give themselves that label and stick up for themselves and advocate for what they need. Um, so, in terms of how we have these positive conversations with students, one example I've heard a parent use is there's nothing wrong with you. It's just like your brain needs glasses, which I thought was a great idea to normalize it and give them something physical that they could use as a representation of what they're feeling. So lots of kids in the class have glasses. You can see they have glasses, but you can't see the kids that have a learning disability. So that can feel really isolating sometimes. Something else I'd like to point out here is that learning disabilities and ADHD result from quantitative differences, not qualitative ones. This means that someone with ADHD doesn't have a completely different brain or think completely different from someone who's neurotypical. But rather they may be better or worse at certain activities. So maybe they're better than someone at writing. Same way that some people watching today are going to be taller or shorter than me. That's a measurable difference, not something that's completely different between two people. So we have another little poll here to make sure everyone's awake. You should be able to see that on your screens now. Just gonna give everyone a few more seconds to answer. Okay. So most people got that correct. The answer was false. And for those who are watching the video recording of this, I'm not sure if you would have been able to see the poll. So the question is, true or false, all LDs are outgrown by adulthood. LDs might be noticed and diagnosed when people are younger, but they can affect all areas of a person's life. Often by adulthood, people have found ways to use their strengths, and the disability may affect their lives in a different way than when they were younger. For example, the kid who used to be unable to sit still in class might now be an adult with an extremely busy schedule. So, for more information on what LDs can look like later in life, we actually have a great podcast that features our LDAYS champions. Our champions are adults with learning disabilities that share their stories and experiences to try to inspire others to use their LD to motivate them and really put a positive narrative around the whole thing.
Okay, so this is just another little reading activity. This one can seem a little trickier, but again, I'm going to give everybody roughly a minute to be able to try and read what's on the page here. So hopefully everybody's kind of had the chance to read or attempt to kind of read what's on the page. So this is actually what something or this is what reading may look like for a student that has a learning disability that affects their writing, such as dysgraphia. So again, I'm going to read what is actually written on the page, and I encourage you to either just follow along or use your finger and see if you were correct when you were reading it. So this actually says 1 in 10 people have a learning disability. It can be hard to diagnose because you can't see it. It's invisible. It's a lifelong condition. A child with an LD grows into a youth with an LD who then becomes an adult with an LD. So it's interesting to kind of hear the answer and then look at the page and see if you were able to figure it out. So some strategies for a child that may have dysgraphia can include using assistive technology, giving students larger spaces to write, providing a photocopy of notes so that they don't have to worry about sitting in class and taking the notes for themselves, because that can also create some stress and anxiety for the child. And breaking down motor tasks. So instead of teaching the student how to write, which of course is important, it's actually important to teach a child that may struggle with this proper pencil grip instead.
So, a question that we receive quite often, and is also one of the questions that Vicky brought to us when we were originally discussing this presentation, is how do I know if my child has an LD? So, here we've listed a few indicators. So, behavioral concerns, lack of focus, taking longer to complete certain tasks, academic difficulties, inconsistent results. So maybe grades differ across all subjects in all areas of their report card. They might um, have like a needs improvement in one area, but they're excellent in another area. Or they might be super strong in math and then not so strong in literacy. And then also, if they have difficulty understanding and expressing themselves. So, if you think your child might have a learning disability, the best thing to do is communicate with their teachers and try to get them diagnosed through the school. Oftentimes, the teacher is the first person to realize, as learning disabilities are really recognized through academic settings. So it's important to listen to any feedback you receive from students' schools. Um, there's quite a long wait list to be diagnosed through the school, but you can still talk to your child's teacher or the special education resource teacher to develop what's called an unofficial individual education plan, or IEP. So this will set in place certain supports and accommodations while you wait for a psychoeducational assessment through the school. If you don't want to wait for an evaluation, you can also have your child complete a psychoeducational assessment through a private clinic. These assessments can be a little pricey, but depending on your insurance plan, you might be able to receive some coverage there. I know that people are watching from all over Ontario, so I'm not going to recommend any individual clinics as I normally would. Um, but if you just search psychology today, you can find assessment clinics in your area.
Okay, so this is just a great resource that we like to show. It's actually from York Region District School Board, and we do have the link on the slide if you want to be able to access it later. So this is a great resource just to kind of help give people a better understanding on learning disabilities, what signs you might be seeing, as well as some tips and strategies that can be used as well. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing. It is a longer document. It's called the York Region District School Board Understanding Learning Disabilities Waterfall Chart. So quite the long name, and it is a long document, and we don't have the time to go through the whole thing. So I'm just kind of give some general notes on each of the sections. So the first one is phonological processing. So students with this difficulty might have problems with pronunciation, reading challenges, rhyming words, and some strategies that could be used include sound walls or word banks, um, as well as visual cues. So going into language, some possible indicators for students with this difficulty can include naming letters and numbers, understanding and expressing vocabulary, connecting oral and written responses, and difficulties with both verbal and nonverbal communication. So some tips for this include creating, again, word banks, displaying graphs or illustrations for the child to see, as well as reducing any visual clutter that is around the student's workspace. So now going into visual motor skills. So students with this difficulty might have problems with cutting, coloring, tracing letters on a page, their pencil grip, as well as responding quickly to motor tasks. So that could be, if they're in gym class, dribbling a basketball or learning how to tie their shoes might be very difficult as well. So some tips for this include larger prints on the page, reducing the number of questions that include motor tasks, and also providing access to digital tools and supports, And do not time or ask for speed when it comes to written or similar tasks. So drawing or tracing, again, that can also put anxiety on the child if they know that they're in a time limit. So now going on to visual spatial or visual perceptual skills. So some indicators of this can include remembering the difference between left and right, remembering letter formations or patterns, as well as organizing their materials and assignments and knowing how to use traditional words appropriately. So meaning like first, then. So some tips to help with these students can include simplifying any visual displays, reducing, again, visual clutter around the student, as well as helping and acknowledging the importance of asking questions to clarify, which kind of ties in with self-advocacy, which we're going to touch on a little later. Now moving into memory. I know I'm giving a lot of information right now. These students may have difficulty with remembering information they may have even just seen or heard. So remembering long enough to be able to use it and understand the information that they were just given. So this can be ideas when reading or writing or both. So some helpful tips include keeping oral instructions short, simple, and to the point, as well as giving very few instructions at a time. So maybe giving them 2 steps as opposed to 4 steps at a time, as well as teaching the use of any memory aids to help them and use visuals to help the students understand better. So now going into processing speed. So some indicators may include difficulty with reading and writing fluently. So copying words and sentences correctly and quickly, and being able to scan the information visually and understand it quickly. So some strategies can include reducing the number of distractions around the child, which can be helpful for any child really, and allowing the use of calculators, again, word banks or learning walls. I know that they're all kind of named different things depending on the teacher or the parent. And also respecting wait time for the child to be able to process and understand the information as well. So now moving into attention, just a few more here. Students may have difficulty maintaining consistent levels of attention. So this could be finishing tasks can be very difficult, and this can also not just be at school, it can be at home as well. It doesn't have to just be with academics. Organizing tasks and materials to get stuff done, and of course, staying on topic can be difficult for them. So some tips include, again, breaking down some instructions to help and keep the student focused or the child focused, as that could also be called chunking the information, is what we like to say. And also encourage them to write down the main points so that they can try to stay focused on that a little bit better, as well as structure any instructions and assessments or assignments, tasks to help better support their focus. So the last one, going into executive functioning. So students may have difficulty with, of course, initiation, planning, organization, self-monitoring, working memory, and sustaining their attention. So kind of a lot of things clumped into what's called executive functions. So some tips to help for those struggling with executive function skills include chunking and breaking down instructions, creating visual planners. So if a child has a visual calendar in either the bedroom or maybe in their kitchen or in classrooms at school so they can see what's going to come next, as well as encouraging the student to talk through multi-step tasks. So if they're given 3 tasks, they need to be able to kind of talk themselves through, encourage them to kind of talk themselves through so they can remember and get the task complete. And of course, the use of any visual cues to help the individual. So unfortunately, we don't have the time to go through the whole thing, but again, this is a really great resource to use. There's a lot of information on it, a lot more tips and kind of more in depth about what each one is and what could be helpful. And there's just really great indicators on there. So again, the link is here, or if you just want to Google it as well, it should be able to come up.
It's in the chat as well.
Awesome. It's in the chat as well.
Perfect.
Thank you, Nina.
Thanks, Nina. Okay, moving on to advocacy. Oh, I have
Okay.
one more poll to launch here.
Yeah.
So the question is, how confident do you feel in your ability to advocate for your needs and rights? Okay, looks like we're finally getting a lot of mixed answers here. So it's good to know that we're going to be talking about how to do this today. I actually think I can share the results too.
Oh, Alicia, did you want to share the results or?
Oh, did they not come up? My bad. I thought I pressed share, but sorry about that.
Yes, they
Everyone
came
just
up
know
good
there was a
too.
lot of mixed answers.
Oh, you can't see them. Okay, maybe it was just me then. Sorry about that. Okay. So I'm sure most people have maybe heard the word advocacy before or self-advocacy. So of course, advocacy is the purpose is to assist in securing the rights of oneself or another person. And so we've just listed out kind of a process or a few steps on how to effectively advocate. So specifying unmet needs or rights. So for example, if your child has the right to extra time as per their IEP, the individual education plan, communicate this with their teacher, as well as clarifying obstacles. So if there's a reason your child is not receiving one of their accommodations, of course, the first reaction could be to get a little frustrated, but make sure you're listening to find out why they may not be receiving this accommodation first. Make sure that you obtain information and document the conversations that you are having. So this can help develop your advocacy skills, and it's important to have everything in writing. So even if it means carrying a notepad with you to any meetings or conversations, just to jot down even main points. And then number 4 is just communicate and negotiate clearly. So focus on 1 or 2 issues at a time, as well as share important information that may assist with decision making. So number 5 is using a team approach to problem solve. So try and work with the system, not against the system. And number 6 being make sure that the unmet needs have been addressed and follow up. It's important to keep all communication lines open and ongoing.
So when is advocacy required? Always. Advocacy is a lifelong process. It's needed in educational settings, in doctors' offices, in the workplace. Truly, in every aspect of your life, you need to know how to stand up for yourself and ask for the things that you need.
So we understand that advocacy can seem kind of like an abstract concept, but there are resources to help. Of course, everybody's going to kind of figure out their own way that's going to work best for them or for the child. So using a form like this is something that can help track advocacy and make sure they aren't missing anything. Again, this is just a suggestion that we like to show and kind of stuff that we've used in the past. So this form is think, what is the purpose of the meeting? Reviewing the questions, and then kind of just actively participate in the discussion. So were you asked for your opinions? Be honest, track yes or no. Did you offer your opinions? Did you offer any information? Did you ask any questions? So this is just kind of a good form that we have used in the past with students. But again, everybody's styles are so different and is going to work. Everything kind of, you need to figure out what's going to work best for the individual. But feel free to take a picture of this. But there are tons of other resources online that can kind of help with advocating as well.
So this is another resource from the York Region District School Board. It can be found on the same site as that waterfall processing chart that was shown earlier. Um, this kind of explains to parents where they can start if they have a concern. So, for example, if a teacher is not following a certain accommodation, start with them, then go to the special education resource teacher. If the issue is still not resolved, you can go to the principal and continue down this list as follows until your issue is resolved. Most of the time, we find that teachers are willing and wanting to support. They might just be unaware of the accommodation or didn't thoroughly go over the IEP. This also illustrates why it's so important to document information and conversations, because if you go to the principal, they're going to want to know if you've spoken to the teacher and the CERT.
Sorry, was just having some difficulty there with my computer, but so kind of going more into self-advocacy is of course to speak on one's behalf and represent personal needs and interests. So we'll kind of go more in depth, but of course, knowledge of your academic strengths and weaknesses, and awareness of required accommodations and services that are available, knowledge of the individual rights, and the ability to request information, assistance, and accommodations when required. So having knowledge of your academic strengths and weaknesses is always important for a variety of reasons. One, it can help gain confidence and create easier goal setting, as well as understanding how you learn personally, because everybody learns differently. So having awareness of required accommodations and services that are available are, of course, to help with improved learning and performance, as well as helps with the confidence of the individual, which then, of course, leads to greater success. So everyone should have knowledge of their own rights as an individual, and knowing about the access to resources then leads into greater self-advocacy skills. And again, having the ability to request information, assistance, and accommodations when required leads into greater understanding and success rate of the individual. It can also make for smoother and less stressful academics. And so advocating for others is important, but it's equally as important to advocate for yourself as well. So we like to say, some of you might have already heard it before, but give someone a fish, you feed them for a day, teach them how to fish, you feed them for a lifetime.
So, similar to how we shared that form to help you advocate for others, we want to share a tool to help you advocate for yourself. This is actually a card that is used in our SOAR transitions program. And it helps children understand their strengths, their areas of improvement, and accommodations. This is an example from Julia Osborne, who's a special education resource teacher with the WIRE DSB. She noticed her students had good ideas about what they needed, but they weren't sure what to do with that information or how to share it. These cards are a means for students to communicate their needs as learners and also to support communications with their teachers. When developing these cards, it's important to have your child's IEP nearby. And like I said, we have programs in which our facilitators will do this step for you and work with students to develop these cards. So I want to do one last activity here and give everyone a second to think about what would be on your card. So how do you learn? What are your strengths? What do you have difficulty with? And what kind of accommodations can you use to help you with that? So I'll give everyone a second. And while I let you think on that, I thought I could share what would be on mine because I think these aren't just good for students, they're good for everyone. This is information that we should all know about ourselves. So, my strengths are that I think that I'm pretty motivated. I don't give up easily. If I start something, I like to see it through. I'm also fairly organized, as long as you don't look inside my closet behind me. Um, but I like to take detailed notes, and I'm a big planner. I like to stay on top of things. I'm also a visual learner. So, one thing that helps me stay organized is keeping my calendar somewhere I can see it. Even though I do consider myself to be motivated, one of the things that I have difficulty with is starting a task if it seems unmanageable. So if it seems too big, um, similar to a lot of the strategies that we've talked about throughout this presentation, one thing that could help me with that is breaking it into smaller tasks or giving myself more time to complete it so it seems more manageable. So I hope everyone kind of got some ideas from that and now is able to think about how they could do one of these for themselves.
So we are going to touch a little bit on our available programs and services, but we do just want to share this quote with you before we get into that. So if students are not learning the way we teach, we have to teach the way they learn. So this is just a quote that we like to kind of follow and something that we kind of believe in at the Learning Disabilities Association.
Okay, we're going to get into our programs now. So our SOAR transition program is the one that I mentioned helps develop those self-advocacy cards. This is for both elementary students and high school students. It helps students understand their goals, learning preferences, prepare for exams, foster study habits. For the high school program, it can help high school students understand what's next for them after high school. Do they want to go to college, university? Do they want to get into the job force or and find strategies to support their learning disability?
Okay, so next we have social skills. So our social skills program is for ages 7 to 13. So some topics that are covered are interpersonal skills, communication, listening, emotional regulation, as well as conflict resolution, problem solving, self-advocacy, self-esteem, and bullying. So these sessions actually happen. It's in 6 weeks. It's once a week for 1 hour. We have a few different locations that are available within York Region and Simcoe. And if you're wondering if this program would be kind of something that would be beneficial for your child, would be maybe they avoid social contact, they behave a little more immaturely than other children their age. They might be a little more shy or timid in groups, or just need help with kind of having that appropriate communication skills in order to maintain friends. They might frequently fight with peers or display a lack of self-esteem and self-confidence. And all of the students, again, in this program also have an LD or ADHD. So we do have the social skills, but then we also have the camp. So the social skills is 6 weeks, and then our camps are, of course, 5 days throughout the week. We have our March break camp as well as summer camps as well. So this one is from 7 to 13 as well. It is a bigger group than the 6 weeks. So the 6 weeks maximum, we have about 8 kids, whereas in the camps, we can see upwards to 13 or 14 kids. So same topics as our social skills groups, but just split into 5 days with more engaging and interactive activities.
We also offer tutoring programs. So our Level Up tutor program is a one-on-one virtual program for grades 2 to 8. It helps recognize learning styles, strengths, and build study habits to assist children in better learning. It's a numeracy and literacy program, and it helps them kind of learn to love learning and increase self-esteem, supports with homework, and helps them stay on top of things and remain organized throughout the school year. Another tutoring program we have, this is also a one-on-one virtual program. We have a reading intervention program and a math intervention program. Both of these programs are 8 weeks long. There's 2 1-hour sessions per week. And there's more information about both of these programs on our website. I don't want to get too much into it because I want to make sure we still have time for questions at the end.
So we also do offer support programs. They are free online programs that run once a month. So we offer both parent and adult support programs. So some topics that are kind of covered are enhancing knowledge and understanding of LDs and ADHD. For the adult support program, it could be connecting with others with LDs and ADHD. And of course, for the parents, it's connecting with others who have shared experiences of their children having LDs or ADHD. It also gives a sense of empowerment and community and provides a safe and supportive environment where you can express any concerns or feelings. And for the dates, it is on our website for the monthly dates. And last but not least, we have our strategies for life and job fit. So our strategies for life is for ages 19 and up. Some of the learning objectives that goes on is understanding how your learning disability or ADHD affects your life and understanding the barriers, but also creating coping strategies for it. It can also help build decision making and advocacy skills, like kind of what we touched on earlier, to reach your fullest potential. And then again, going into the job fit program, some learning objectives are to learn and focus your strengths rather than dwell on your difficulties, as well as understand your learning disability, but also how to explain them to a future employer. And understanding how your LD may affect your ability to work and identifying what job might be the right fit for you and what jobs might not be the right fit for you.
And then I do think this was just brought up in the chat, but these are the chapters of the Learning Disabilities of Ontario. So as Vicky mentioned in the beginning, we are York Region and York Simcoe. If any of those programs were of interest to you and they are not offered at your local chapter, you can come to us. Most of them are online, so we are still able to service you. But if they are offered at your local chapter, we do ask that you receive them from your local chapter. And then here is Tori and I's contact information. So as mentioned, I manage the educational programs and volunteers, and Tori manages the social skills programs. And then there's also our website, our general phone number and email if you have any more general inquiries about anything talked about today, or Tori and I would be happy to answer those questions as well.